Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honour.
Ms Ford.
Your Honour, this morning we will attempt to take concurrent evidence from the two fire investigators involved with the cause and origin investigation for the Currawong and Tianjara fires. We've had a test run of the technology, and this morning it's worked really well, which is almost a surefire way to predict it's going to play up at some point during the course of the morning, but we'll muddle through as best we can. So I call Stephen May and Rani home.
I think we've got Stephen May and Rani Home there on the screen. Can you see and hear us? Yes.
Yes, I can.
Mr May? All right, you'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr May, I will do your affirmation first. So silence, please. Do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you, Mr May. Ms Hume, do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence that you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Ms Holm, would you state your full name, your rank and your current station?
It's Rani Holm. I'm a senior constable, currently attached to the Bay and Basin Police Station.
Right, we're just getting a little bit of feedback there. Could I get you to just repeat your current station?
It's Bay and Basin Police Station.
Are you still within the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command of New South Wales Police?
No, I'm not.
At the time that you prepared a fire cause and origin investigation report for the Currawong fire and the Tianjara fire, where were you based?
The Nowra crime scene section at Nowra Police Station.
And Mr May, would you state your full name and professional address?
Stephen James May, working out of Southwest Slope Zone Hilltops.
And you're an authorised wildfire investigator with the Rural Fire Service, is that correct?
That is correct.
And in that capacity, you prepared a cause and origin investigation report relating to the Currawong fire and the Tianjara fire, is that right?
That is correct.
I'm going to ask you firstly some questions this morning, each of you, about the Currawong fire, and then we'll come to the Tianjara fire later. But because we're using the technology and we're having a few problems already, I'm going to just ask you to each bear in mind that we will have to take care not to talk over each other because we're trying to record this for transcript purposes. And Your Honour, I can indicate when we tested this even 10 minutes ago, we had much clearer vision and audio than we have at present. So can we ask for just a 2-minute adjournment while we try and get it back to the standard it was only 10 minutes ago?
Certainly. We'll just have a very short adjournment.
Thank you, Your Honour. Yeah, thank you.
YouTube was fine. Just in here was the problem. Silence, please. All stand. This coroner's court.
Yes, Ms Ward.
Thank you for that opportunity, Your Honour. We think that we've secured a stronger link now, and indeed the audio, I think, is better already, but we'll see how we go.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Mr. May and Ms. Holm, before we adjourned, I was just reminding you that we are recording these proceedings for transcript purposes, so it will be important that we try not to talk over each other in the course of the questions that follow. I will give each of you an opportunity to respond to anything that the other expert has said, should you require that opportunity. Could I start by asking each of you to have a look at the map, which is at page 702 of the brief, and it's about to be shown on the screen. Now, Mr. May, this is a map that we have taken from your report, and I wonder if you can orientate the court to the map by firstly telling us where the King's Highway is displayed.
Yeah, King's Highway is at the southern point of the map. I've come up the King's Highway onto Lyons Road, which is that GPX tracking mark you can see heading directly north.
Yes. So King's Highway, using the indicators on the y-axis, seems to start just above 61 on the left-hand side.
See that close.
Is it not clear enough on your copy?
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I may have cut it out.
Ms. Holm, can you see the King's Highway marked on that map?
I can, and I think the area that you're trying to speak about, where that greenish coloured line where Steve May's left the King's Highway, you actually can't see the King's Highway on this map at that point where he's turned off it, but it is that red line.
No, but if we go to the y-axis and to the number 61 marked on the far left-hand side.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
The King's Highway enters the map at that point, is that right?
Yes, and head southeast.
Yes, and then as Ms. Holmes says, it falls off the map. And then what we do is we pick up Lyons Road in the middle of the map between 34 and 35, marked with the green thick line. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Mr. May, the green thick line is the GPS tracker recording your progress along Lyons Road on the day that you conducted your site assessment. Is that right?
Yes.
And what day was this?
It's throwing me out now. 12th of December. Wait a minute.
Well, yes, the 12th of December 2019. Does that sound right?
That is correct. Sorry about that. I got all the paperwork.
No. You had attempted earlier site visits, but it was too unsafe to enter the general area of origin on those earlier days. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Prior to your visit to the site on the 12th of December 2019, were you aware of reports of lightning strikes in the vicinity of Mines Road on the evening of 25 November 2019?
When I was allocated the Coronial fire for investigation, I obtain all the relative information out of the ICON system. That includes the maps, and then I do a lightning query myself and do a 10-kilometre radius around the burnt area at that stage, and that's as far as I go. I just can't,
So if we come back to my question, prior to your attendance at the site on the 12th of December 2019, were you aware of lightning strikes in the vicinity of Mines Road reported around the 25th or even the 26th of November 2019?
No, not at Mines Road. I had a general area of a lot of lightning strikes. I don't zoom down.
Okay, all right. Thank you, all right. So can we just use the map then to explain the route that you took on the 12th of December? You started off on Lyons Road and you followed that up to the junction of Mines Road. Is that right?
It's correct, and turn right into Mines Road.
And were you able to drive all the way along Lyons Road?
No, I was able to get probably 300 metres, and the road was blocked by heavy timber, so I'd walk the rest of the way in.
So you had to walk all the way along Lyons Road to the Mines Road intersection, and then what did you do?
No, I'm sorry, you might have misunderstood me. I turned right into Mines Road and I couldn't traverse Mines Road with the ute. So I walked from Mines Road, following Mines Road northeast to where the map had intersected the Mines Road.
I'm just going to check, is that audio clear enough for our purposes? Okay. So, Mr. May, when you got to Lyons Road and it was blocked so that you had to walk, did you continue walking along Lyons Road or did you take some other route?
The audio, are you saying Lyons or Mines Road?
Lyons, Lyons.
No, I traversed Lyons Road in the ute.
In the ute, okay. On the map, can you tell us the grid references for the intersection of Lyons Road and Mines Road?
That intersection is at grid 362, 645, roughly.
So I'm just going to have that circled in court. So we're just going to have that highlighted in court for Your Honour's benefit. All right, and you can see the rough juncture of those two roads. All right, Mr. May, so you then turned onto Mines Road in your vehicle, is that right?
That is correct.
And you got about 300 metres along Mines Road, is that right?
That's correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that at all.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And that's when you had to get out of the vehicle because the road was blocked and you had to proceed by foot, is that right?
That is correct.
When you were walking along by foot, did you stick to Mines Road?
Yes,
for at least
I did.
a period of time? Okay. And then does this map show that there comes a point where you actually diverge from Mines Road and head down into a gully.
That is correct.
Okay. And on the map that's on the screen, have you marked the point of origin that you ultimately determined for the Currowan fire with a yellow triangle?
Yes, I have.
Now, Senior Constable Holm, you conducted a site inspection in January of 2020, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Having first been able to conduct an aerial examination with Mr. May on the 7th of January, is that correct?
Yes.
But your actual site inspection took place on the 14th of January, is that right?
Yes.
I'm going to ask for the footage from page 703 of the brief to be displayed on the screen. And Mr. May, is this a photograph that you took for the purpose of your cause and origin investigation? Or footage that you obtained, I should say.
Yes, that is a GPS.
And we can see it. Yes. And the green squiggly lines that is displayed on that map are setting out the route that you took as you came off Mines Road and headed down towards the gully during your inspection. Is that right?
That is correct.
And just so that the court can orientate itself to the map, we have, although not displayed very clearly in court, we have Mines Road marked by the thin red line. Is that right?
Yes.
And then we have two fire trails that each come off Mines Road, one in the bottom right-hand corner on the version displayed in court, and one in the top left-hand corner. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And they were the compartment 487 roads.
The bottom
Is that
road
right?
is compartment 487/2 and the top road is 487/1.
Thank you. What was the purpose of the zigzagging route that you took from Mines Road?
I was tracking directional vector indicators to the east using a serpentine pattern to make sure I covered enough area that I wasn't following the wrong run of fire.
So is it the case that you were using the indicators you could see on the ground to guide you to the likely area of origin for the fire?
That is correct.
Now, Senior Constable Holm, did you approach the likely area of origin from a different approach or another direction?
Yes.
All right. Could you explain to the court the direction that you approached the area of origin for your investigation?
Yes, we followed the same roads from the King's Highway as far as coming up Lyons Road and then a short distance up Mines Road, but we stopped at the junction of Mines Road and the compartment 487-2 road, which is the one in the bottom right-hand corner. We then followed that trail compartment 487-2 along a ridge line and then came down the gully at a different point and approached from what would be sort of the right-hand side of that picture towards the gully and then up to the point of origin.
And why did you do that? Why did you take a different approach?
Partially for ease of access and partially to examine a different part of the landscape than Steve May had, just to ensure that the indicators from a different direction led to the same conclusion.
It's important to note, isn't it, that even coming in from your different direction, you still formed the same conclusion as to the likely area of origin for the Currowan fire.
Yes.
And Senior Constable, were you able to, with the assistance of New South Wales Police Rescue, take some photographs with a drone on the day that you conducted your investigation?
Yes.
Could I ask you both to have a look at the document that will now come up onto the screen? It's page 600 of the brief. All right. Senior Constable, is this one of the drone photos that New South Wales Police obtained?
No, that one's a photograph taken from the helicopter on the day of the flyover.
All right, so this was taken then on the 7th of January, was it?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. May, were you present in the helicopter flyover of the scene?
I was.
Thank you. Now, I'm not sure that you can actually see it clearly on the copy that's displayed in court on the screen, but this photograph has marked Mines Road with a red arrow. Can you both see that?
Yes.
Yes.
And Your Honour might be able to see more clearly on the hard copy rather than the copy on screen, but you can just faintly make out Mines Road through the landscape of those burnt trees. And then, is it the case that the area of origin is down in the gully that falls away from Mines Road at that site?
Yes.
And Mr. May, do you agree with that?
I do.
We can see in this photo many burnt trees on the side of Mines Road closest to, to the base of the photo. Have those trees likely burnt as a result of the backing fire from the area of origin?
Steve,
Mr. May?
Sorry.
And if it's too speculative, just say so.
No. The side opposite Mines Road was a backing lateral fire, and I believe that was in the evening of the early morning of the 26th. And the fire on the which is the western side, which is the closest side to us, was an advancing fire heading to the west.
Thank you. Could we now have a look at the photo on screen, which is from page 601 of the brief? Senior Constable, is this a photo that you took during your investigation of the scene?
Yes.
The photo shows in the middle a mound of disturbed soil.
Yes.
Do you hypothesise that the Currowan fire was caused by a lightning strike, which ultimately discharged into the ground and threw up a mound of soil and rocks as marked on this photo?
I think that is a likely hypothesis, yes.
And Mr. May, do you agree with that likely hypothesis?
Yes, I do.
And then, Mr. May, does the hypothesis extend to this, that a nearby tree was also damaged by lightning, although the lightning did not discharge into the tree?
Sorry, it's a funny terminology. Yes, the lightning did pass through 2 branches of a tree,
Yes.
but that was not the area of origin of the fire. The mound was.
All right. Please correct my terminology if I'm using the wrong terminology, because I'm obviously not a fire investigator. Is it fair to say that your evidence is the lightning passed through the tree, but it didn't ground through the tree?
That is correct.
Okay. And that tree is shown in this photo, isn't it?
Yes.
And in particular, the court can see the damaged eucalypt tree and the arrow that points to a fork within that tree, showing from this distance some charring to either side of the forked limbs. Is that right?
That is correct.
Mr. May, what was the terrain like around the location where the tree and the mound of disturbed soil were found?
The train was on the northern side of a gully with a 3-to-1 slope heading to the north. The actual general of origin had sparse shrubby trees and a lot of tall hardwood gum trees.
These photos don't really explain how steep it was at this point. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Senior Constable, was this photo taken standing downhill and looking back up to the mound of disturbed soil and through that to the damaged eucalypt tree?
Yes.
And do you agree that the photos don't fully or accurately represent how steep the terrain was at this point?
No, they don't.
Are you able to give an estimate of the distance between the mound of disturbed soil and the damaged eucalypt?
I would need to check my statement, but it wasn't far. Like, it was under 50 metres.
Mr. May, do you have any estimate on the distance between the mound of disturbed soil and the damaged eucalypt?
I would say it was somewhere between 15 to 25 metres.
Thank you. Could we now have a look at the photo contained at page 602 of the brief? Which is, I think, a photo that gives us another aspect of the damaged eucalypt tree and the mound of disturbed soil. Mr. May, is it your recollection that the fallen limbs, which are displayed in this photograph, were actually quite close to the damaged eucalypt tree?
Two were not. 2 were closer to the mound, and the other limb was much closer to the tree.
All right. So 3 limbs came down?
No, 4.
4, thank you. 2 were closer to the mound. 1 was found closer to the tree. Where was the 4th?
They're lying beside each other.
But where was the 4th limb? Lying beside what? The 2 closer to the mound or the 1 closer to the tree?
Closest to the mound.
Thank you. Now, if we can have a look at the image at page 604 of the brief. And again, does this photo give us some perspective of the location of the damaged tree relative to the mound of disturbed soil? Would you agree with that, Mr. May?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Just for those of us that haven't walked that ground, the photographs are the closest thing we have to explain what it is that you two saw. Even though Your Honour, those photos are not of great quality on the screen, but we'll just have to make do. Can I say, Senior Constable and Mr. May, if it's easier for you to follow along with the hard copy photos that you have in front of you rather than the way they appear on the screen, please do so. I'm now going to bring up page 607 onto the screen. And Senior Constable, does this display the fractured limbs of the subject tree with charring on some ends?
Yes.
It's a little fuzzy in the version that's displayed in court, but are we in fact looking at two separate ends in the middle of that photo, separate and charred?
Yes, it's the taller limb that's there is charred, but the charred side is away from the camera, so it's a bit difficult to see from this photograph that there's two charred areas, but there is.
Yes, so thank you. The tall limb is actually also charred on the other side, is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. May, would you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Mr. May, something must have caused that fire damage at that point of the limbs that have fractured, but there doesn't seem to be any fire damage to the trunk of the tree below. Would you agree with that summary?
Yes, I do.
And how did that factor into your investigation?
The two limbs were indicative of treetop lightning strike. They had tipped and pointed ends, they were charred, and there was no sign of fire reaching those 2 points, and nor there was any sign of scarring through lightning tracking going down past the tree.
Thank you.
So my hypothesis to that was that tree was struck by lightning.
So even the tipped and pointed ends of the fractured limbs that remain in situ suggest to you lightning strike, is that right?
Yes.
We're now going to turn back to some of the photos that Mr. May took. So if I could ask you to have a look at page 650 of the brief, which will shortly come up on screen. Mr. May, is this one of the fractured limbs that you found on the ground in proximity to the damaged tree?
Yes.
And it seems that only the face of that broken branch that's facing the photographer is charred, but that the limb extending from it is unburnt. Is that right?
That is correct.
And again, what did you conclude from that?
I concluded that piecing this fractured branch to the tree, and the fire passed underneath it, that branch had come from that gum tree we just saw in the previous photos, and it came down after the fire had left the area.
Yes. And did you draw a similar conclusion with the other fallen branches that you located on the ground?
Yes, all of them.
All right, well, we'll just bring each of those photos up. So if we can firstly turn to page 651, and that will come up on the screen. Mr. May, is that another of the fallen limbs that you observed?
Yes, it is.
And then if we turn over to page 652, is that another of the fallen limbs that you had observed?
That is correct.
Then if we could bring up page 653 on the screen. Mr. May, is this a photo of the large tree that you took?
Yes, it is.
And although it's not clear on the copy displayed in court, your caption to that photograph includes this comment: There are no signs of lightning grounding itself through the tree, nor are there any signs that fire from the ground reached that part of the tree. You've already this morning told Her Honour of some of the signs that you might have expected if the lightning had grounded through the tree. But are there other signs that you would typically expect to see and didn't?
I was expecting to see needle showering, which is an explosion of sparks when it hits the tree. But because it normally forms on surrounding bush and on the ground, but because of the fire that had consumed all available fuels, there was no sign of needle showering.
All right. Were there other than signs that you would expect to see if lightning had grounded through the tree?
If the lightning had, if there was no external mark, I also look at the girth of the tree to see if there's any swelling, because lightning can actually come down through a core of a tree and exit through the root system. There was also no sign of movement to the root system.
All right. So no sign in the girth of the tree of swelling and no signs at the root system. Anything else?
Nothing that I've already discussed.
You conclude the caption there by saying the tree is approximately 12 metres north of the SAO. What's the SAO?
Specific area of origin.
So is it fair to say that the tree was close to but not in the specific area of origin?
That is correct. The tree was in the general area of origin.
Can we then turn to page 660, and I'll have that photo brought up on screen. Mr. May, is this a photo of the amount of disturbed soil that you took during your investigation?
Yes, it is.
And you ultimately determined that the amount of disturbed soil was the specific area of origin. Is that right?
Yeah, the specific area of origin, yeah, that's correct.
And what were the indicators that led to that conclusion?
The mound had a distinct blowhole through electrical resistance that I could observe. That was approximately about a metre wide and 500 mil deep. The mound itself had suffered a disruptive shock wave from the lightning strike, which raised the mound and lowered it back down, a bit like a roof on a house coming back down. The mound itself had a number of cracks through it, where I could see the fibrous roots had actually broken apart, and I could actually see the natural soil through those cracks. Do you need to keep going?
Well, I might. I'm going to take you to some close-up photos of the mound, and you might explain to Her Honour whether these photos actually demonstrate any of those observations you've just made. I'm sorry to make the two of you jump around, but if we could come to page 611 of the photos taken by New South Wales Police, and that's going to come up on screen. Firstly, Mr. May, does this photograph demonstrate backing fire spreading out from the mound of disturbed soil?
Yes.
And is that backing fire marked with the blue arrows? I'm sorry, I didn't hear an answer.
Sorry, yes, it is.
Thank you. And then in the top left-hand corner, can we see one of the fallen limbs in that photo?
I don't have a copy of those photos.
Oh, okay. And if it's too blurry on the screen, just say so.
Can we enlarge?
I'm sorry?
Can we enlarge it?
I'm not sure that we can. We'll try, but we might lose further resolution. You see between the two blue arrows in the top left-hand corner, there seems to be a limb on the ground. I'm wondering if that's one of the limbs that is suspected of having fallen from the large ship.
Sorry, the photos are a little blurry at my end. I can't pick it.
All right, thank you, Mr. May. Senior Constable, can you say on the copy that's available to you whether or not that's one of the fallen limbs?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. May, is there anything else that might have caused the mound of disturbed soil that you saw at the site?
The mound was really inducive to, inducive, it's the wrong word, indicative to a lightning strike with the amount of indicators that was previously discussed and the amount of soil that was thrown to the south and the rocks. It was very indicative of lightning strike.
All right. And Senior Constable, do you agree as to the mound of disturbed soil falling within the specific area of origin?
Yes.
With indicators of backing fire coming from the vicinity of the mound of disturbed soil?
Yes.
And can you think of any other potential cause for the mound of disturbed soil that you observed?
No, and I didn't locate any evidence of any other cause of that mound of disturbed earth while I was there.
We might then just turn to page 616 and that photo will come up on screen. Mr. May, did you also during your site visit observe an old fallen log that had been displaced from its original resting place?
Yes, I did.
And although this is a photo taken by New South Wales Police, is this a photograph of the log that you had observed?
Yes, it is.
What made you think that this log had been displaced?
On the northern side of that log is a lot of dirt and silt that's washed down from the north, and that log had been pushed down to the south with a void now between that mound and the log that you could actually see down and see where the natural earth was.
Yes.
And you could actually see the imprints of that timber against the natural earth.
So you could see an imprint of where that log had once rested. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what do you think had displaced the log?
I thought it was the destructive shock wave from the lightning strike.
Any other possible causes for the log being displaced?
I didn't rule out that log had actually been hit by a piece of flying timber as well, but that log with that weight needed a fair jolt to move it the distance it did.
All right. Is it fair to say that the displaced log was another piece in the puzzle for you in trying to determine the source of ignition for the Coronial fire, although not determinative of itself?
Yes.
All right. And I'm sorry, the audio is not great. You agreed with that, did you?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Senior Constable, what did you think about the old fallen log? Did that fit into your theory about a likely source of ignition for the fire?
The log itself I didn't consider it as a likely source of ignition, but it was certainly, the movement of it was indicative that something it was in the area where something had happened to cause the ignition.
Thank you. I'm just going to pause and check that we're still getting something clear enough for transcript purposes. But is it? Can we proceed with it? Okay. I was worried, Your Honour, that it might be my hearing. Happily, it's not just my hearing. You'll just have to bear with me, please, Senior Constable and Mr May. I might need to get you to repeat some of your answers as you give them, just because we're having some difficulties in the courtroom. I'll ask now for page 615 to be shown. Mr May, does this give a better view of the void that you saw between the earth bank and the displaced log?
It does, but that photo was taken in January, and that void is now being covered. The void that I can see is now being covered by leaves and small impediments.
All right. So at the time that you saw the void, was it bigger than displayed in that photo?
It's hard. At this end, it seems about right.
If it's too hard to see...
Yeah, so it's hard for me to pick up because of those rocks are now falling in. When I saw it, they were not there.
We didn't catch that for the transcript. Would you repeat your answer, please?
And I think it has to be slow, if you don't mind, Mr May. Just if you could speak a bit slower, I think it might help.
Thank you, Your Honour. That void or gap, although it's been disguised by the leaf matter that's currently there, was approximately 2 or 3 centimetres for entire length.
All right. I'm going to now try and play some GoPro footage, and we'll see if the technology can cope with this. This is GoPro footage, Your Honour, taken by Mr May at the time of his inspection, but we've turned off the audio, so we just get the footage, and we're going to stop it at certain points and invite Mr May to explain what he has seen or done in the footage. Can I just get you to stop it there, Eden? Mr May, is that clear enough on the version in front of you for you to be able to make sense of it, or is it just too distorted?
Also, I was there, I can actually understand what's going on. I don't know what it is like at your end.
Yeah. You know, there are just a couple of clips that I thought were useful in showing the terrain and also the slope. We can see it tolerably clear in court at the moment. I might proceed, but we might not play the whole clip. We'll just keep playing, and Eden, if you can just wait for me to sing out. Thanks. Right, can we stop? Thanks. What second are we up to? Your Honour, I'm told that the feed is very clear on YouTube. So anyone watching via YouTube is likely to have good audio and visual links. Unfortunately, though, that doesn't help us or the witnesses. But we'll just have to press on. Mr May, are you here approaching the mound of disturbed soil?
That is correct. I'm on the eastern side of that mound as you're looking at it.
All right, and that's the mound, is it?
That is correct.
thank you. All right, we'll keep playing. And can we stop? Mr. May, I'm not sure if it's even possible to distinguish the some of the damage to the mound that you told Her Honour in court this morning you had observed during your inspection. Is any of that damage visible on that screenshot?
Yes, I can see a disturbance to the mound. You can actually see the raising. The mound has been raised and lowered again. And to the left of that screen, you can see the displaced soil being pushed to the south with a number of rocks.
There doesn't seem to be much leaf litter on top of this mound compared to the soil nearby. Was that a relevant observation?
That is correct, and it has happened right through the fire season. The general area of origin, the specific area of origin that we normally track back to with, we normally go from most to least damage. The area of origin were also destroyed as much as the rest of the bushland.
All right, could I get you to just repeat that last part of your answer? The area of origin was also...
The area of origin, all fuel was consumed.
Yes, all right. All right, if we can keep playing. Can we stop? Mr. May, does this photo give some perspective of the incline at the scene?
Yes, it does, approximately 3 to 1.
And Senior Constable, do you agree with that?
Yes.
We'll keep playing. Stop. Now, Mr. May, is this footage of you walking up the slope towards the fallen limb and the fractured eucalypt?
Yes, we just saw a fractured limb to the right that I went to examine. And,
Yes.
And the tree is to that right-hand top corner of that screen.
Okay, just bear with me. Thank you. We're just going to play another short clip. All right, and again, could we see glimpses of that fallen limb through that passage of video that we've just played?
I believe, no, not yet. I believe we're at the now the western end of that mound, looking to the south.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep playing. All right, thank you, Mr. May. We'll keep playing till we can get a good shot of the fallen limbs. So that's one of the limbs there, isn't it, Mr. May?
That is correct.
And we can see the charring at one end, but not anywhere else on that limb.
That is correct.
Your Honour, I think we'll just abandon the exercise. It's not useful enough with these technical problems.
I understand it's departmental-wide this morning, that every court is experiencing difficulties.
In any event, we can play the footage for Your Honour
Yeah.
at another time.
Certainly.
There's about 5.5 minutes of it, but I won't ask Mr May to have to sit through that and try and interpret for us any further. Could I then ask for page 705 of the brief to be shown in court? Actually, no, I'm not going to ask for that. Page 714. Thank you, Eden. All right. Can you each see page 714 of the brief, which is some lightning strike data?
Yes.
Thank you. And can you see that? All right. Mr May, this is a page extracted from your report. Can you explain to Her Honour what is displayed there?
The red circle that is hashed, that is the confirmation of an origin with the word "to," point of origin, pointing to it.
Yep.
It was the location of that mound.
Yes.
There was a lightning strike to its right as you look at it.
Yep.
That was at 22:47 on the 25th of the 11th. And there's other lightning strikes depicted through that.
So other lightning in the area across that evening, is that right?
That is correct.
What are we to make of the fact that the lightning strike data has lightning close to but not in the point of origin?
The ground prediction through GPATs is less than 250 metres. So it doesn't need to be right over the top of it. And it gets worse the steeper the country. So that distance is not an issue.
Yep. There's a margin of error, and the margin of error might increase in particularly steep terrain. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
Mr May, firstly I should ask Senior Constable Holm, do you agree with that interpretation of this lightning strike data?
Yes, I do. It's my understanding that there's a radius around the location where these lightning strikes are detected, where it could impact the ground. It's not necessarily a pinpoint spot where it's impacted with the ground.
Thank you. Mr May, is it the case that not every lightning strike to ground causes a fire?
That is correct.
What are the other factors that are needed in order to generate fire?
Length of continuous current of the lightning is a big one. They call it duration of stroke.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if the lightning is a positive or a negative stroke, as long as the duration of the stroke is sufficient to generate enough heat and the fuel type that the lightning is landing on.
So is it fair to say that your conclusion that the ignition source for the Currawong fire was due to lightning is based on several independent factors? Firstly, the fire indicators advancing from the point of origin, is that right?
Correct.
Secondly, the presence of lightning in the vicinity, according to that lightning strike data, is that right?
Correct.
Next, your observations of the disturbed soil mound itself.
Correct.
Next, your observations of the nearby charred limb and the nearby charred tree branches and the fallen limbs?
Correct.
And anything else?
No.
And Senior Constable Hume, do you agree with that?
I do, but we also take into account the absence of any other of the causes, things that could have caused a fire in that location. So we didn't find any evidence of other causes of fire in the area.
Your Honour heard evidence yesterday from Detective Senior Constable Burston noting the absence of electricity infrastructure, no evidence as to cigarette butts, fire play, not on a road that's likely to have cars driving past regularly. Are those the sort of factors that you are also referring to?
Yes.
And I think they're set out in your report, aren't they, Senior Constable?
They are, yes.
And indeed in the report of Mr May.
Yes, they are.
Thank you. I want to now turn to the Tianjara fire and the investigations that you made in relation to that fire. Mr May, could you turn up your fire investigation report, Wildfire? It's at page 1190 of the brief. And I'm just going to ask you some questions about the observations therein. Do you have that, Mr May? Good. It seems that you first conducted a preliminary investigation at the scene of the Tianjara fire on the 5th of January 2020. Is that right?
That is correct.
And then the next day you went back to the scene and you also had Senior Constable Holm with you on that day to conduct a more detailed investigation. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask you each to have a look at a photo that will come up on screen from page 1198 of the brief. Mr May, is this a photo that you took and that you've labelled an establishment photo of the scene?
Yes, it is.
And you suggest that there's a point of interest in that photograph being the substantial gum tree right of the picture. How did you fix upon the gum tree as being a point of interest?
When I tracked the fire from the southeast back to the northwest, that V pattern of that advancing fire took me to that point.
So again, this is an example of you using fire indicators to track back to the likely point of ignition. Is that right?
That is correct.
And Senior Constable Holm, do you agree that if one uses the indicators to track back, you come to the gum tree as a point of interest?
Yes.
Mr May, we heard yesterday that the scene of the Tianjara fire had been contaminated between the start date of the fire and the date that you were actually able to attend. Do you agree that it had been contaminated?
Yes, through firefighting activities.
Yes, and so through firefighting activities, what are the sort of things that have likely contaminated the scene?
There was a sign of high pressure water on some of the trees with the indicators. There was also indication of high pressure water blowing the leaf matter away from the bottom of that large gum tree, and also there was a scrape mark from what we call a McLeod tool or a fire rake on the scene.
Sorry, a scrape mark from a...
Call it a McLeod tool, or some people call it a fire rake.
A fire rake. Okay, thank you. If the scene had that sort of contamination present, how were you able to rely upon indicators to settle on a point of interest?
On the eastern side of the tree, the microscale indicators were totally wiped out by the firefighting activities. I was relying on macro scale indicators to bring us back to a point, and they took me past the tree to the west, where I was able to observe micro scale indicators to have a rough area of ignition.
So, notwithstanding some contamination, there were still enough indicators left to allow you to settle on a suspected area of origin.
Area of ignition, there was just too many, there was just not enough indicators to conclusively say that that fire left within a metre by a metre. I think our specific area of origin, the fire had left within that.
I'm going to ask you to have a look at photograph on page 1151 of the brief. That should come up on the screen. Now, aside from helping us to orientate ourselves to the scene by noticing the presence of Braidwood Road at the bottom of that photo, Mr. May, is there anything in that photo that explains, that you could point out to explain your conclusions about a suspected area of origin?
Where that the large red arrow is pointing is at the bottom of the V pattern. That pattern on the other side of Braidwood Road to where the burnt area is now, that is one big run of fire through a V pattern. That heavier burnt area to the right came in much, much later.
All right, so is the heavier burnt area to the right, that's obvious to you, is it, as being from a later fire?
That is correct.
Thank you. I'm then going to ask you to look at page 1153 of the brief. It'll come up on the screen. Can you see there that a small arrow points to some debris fragments that were observed at the scene? And tell us, Mr. May, the approximate distance between the debris fragments and the suspected area of origin?
They were varying distances, but if you put an average on it, it would be between 4 and 5 metres.
Thank you. Because, in fact, there were 3 separate fragments, weren't there?
There were.
Thank you. And, Senior Constable, do you agree with that estimate?
Yes.
I'm now just going to skip ahead and move to page 1161 of the brief. I'm going to ask you to just have a look at this photograph. So 1161, thank you. Does this display the larger of the fragments that you observed at the scene, Mr. May?
Yes, it does.
And when you saw it on the day of your inspection, did you have any idea as to what it might be?
I believe with the groove and it was off a tyre rim.
Okay. And Senior Constable, did you have any view as to what it might have been when you observed it on the day?
Given its appearance and its location, it is possible that it was part of a vehicle wheel.
And then if we move to the photo at page 1163 of the brief, Was that a smaller fragment that you observed at the scene, Mr. May?
Yes, it was.
And did you have any idea at the time what that might be?
No.
And Senior Constable, what about you?
No, but it was similar in appearance to that larger fragment.
Mr. May, could I ask you to turn in your report to page 1191 of the brief, where you set out some of the potential causes for the Tianjara fire that you had considered. And just tell me when you've turned up that page.
I'm at that page now.
All right. Do you see at the bottom of the page next to the entry that says equipment use, you observe 3 pieces of shrapnel fragments believed to be from an aluminium wheel rim located in close proximity to the SAO. Aluminium is capable of holding long-term thermal residency. However, there were no aluminium shavings of fragments located within the SAO. If those fragments were from wheel rims, would you expect to see aluminium shavings located nearby?
No. The aluminium wheel rims that we're seeing, or the pieces of aluminium,
Yes.
I could not eliminate a blown wheel or tyre to have actually ignited or been the ignition source of that fire. We were not, when we were looking within the specific area of origin, we weren't only looking for aluminium shrapnel pieces, we were looking for cigarette butts, wheel bearings, anything that would be a cause of ignition.
And is it the case that aside from the 3 pieces that you observed, you found no other evidence of possible ignition sources?
That is correct.
But of course, because the scene had been contaminated through firefighting efforts, we just don't know what, if anything else, might have been present at the time of ignition. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And Senior Constable, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Since you prepared that report, Mr. May, have you been provided with footage of an interview that Detective Senior Constable Burston completed with a Mr. John Croker, who reports seeing 2 small spot fires by the side of the road on the morning the fire commenced, which he was able to stamp out with his feet before getting back into the car, driving further along the road and seeing another and larger fire? Have you now seen that footage? And Senior Constable, thank you. Have you seen that footage as well?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Firstly, Mr. May, what, if anything, do you make of the existence of those 2 smaller fires as described by Mr. Croker?
I have to be careful. I didn't think they were for 2 dinner plate size fires on the side of the road. For someone to ignite them, the moment they closed their door from leaning out their door, if they did it that way, they would have already been dinner plate size. I think Mr. Croker was there at the right time, and it may have come from a spot fire.
Thank you. And Senior Constable, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really, except that from the footage it was difficult to orient exactly where those little fires were in comparison to the area that we identified.
Yes.
So it's hard to comment much further on them, other than to agree with Steve May that if someone had ignited fires by the time they were the size of a dinner plate, our witness would have nearly been on top of them to see it. It would have been pretty quick. That's not much fire development.
Right. So it's likely Mr. Croker might have seen signs of other people at the scene. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, Mr. Croker. Mr. Croker wouldn't have been very far behind anybody who lit a fire that had grown to that size.
So, Senior Constable, does your opinion remain that the cause of the Chianjara fire is undetermined?
Yes, it does.
And Mr. May, does your opinion remain the same?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Your Honour, those are my questions for these witnesses.
I'll just see if there's any questions from Mr. Newton.
No questions, Your Honour.
All right. Thank you very much, Senior Constable, and Mr. May. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you. Your Honour.
Your Honour, the next witness after a morning adjournment will be Mr. Mark Fulligar, the fire investigator for the Moreton fire.
Thank you. We'll take the adjournment and resume at 12.
We just need to prepare, yeah.
Mr. Fulliger, can you see and hear us?
I can.
Thank you. You'll just hear from the court officer now.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Sir, would you state your full name, occupation, and professional address?
Mark Wentworth Fulliger, currently working within the Fire Investigation and Compliance Unit at RFS HQ, 4 Murray Rose Avenue, Sydney Olympic Park.
And are you an authorised fire investigator with the Rural Fire Service?
That is correct.
In that capacity, did you prepare or conduct a fire investigation report which has been provided to Her Honour in relation to the Moreton fire?
I did.
And did you sign a statement dated 7 October 2020 in relation to that investigation?
Yes, I did.
Could you turn up the first page of your fire investigation review, which is page 1779 of the brief, using the red numbers at the bottom of the page? Do you have that, Mr. Fulliger?
Yes, I do.
Do you see there that at the top of the page, by way of background, you say the Moreton fire was created at 22:24 on Saturday, the 4th of January 2020. What do you mean by created?
It was the fire name was created in our icon system when the fire had crossed over the LGA boundary into Wingecarribee.
So the time and date that you fix or you refer to there relates to the time and date that the fire was created within the RFS icon database. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
You're not putting that time forward as the precise moment on which the Currowan fire crossed into another LGA?
No, I'm not.
Thank you. If we come down on that page to the heading that says scene assessment, do you see that?
Yes.
And is it the case that you conducted a scene assessment for the Moreton fire on the 27th of February 2020?
Correct.
Who else was with you for that scene assessment?
Fellow fire investigator Stephen May, Detective Senior Constable Natalie Burston, and Detective Acting Sergeant Gibb.
You say that you attended the Talawa Dam to undertake the first part of the scene assessment. How did you fix upon the Talawa Dam as the first location point?
Well, we took that as the fire had already crossed the Shoalhaven River near the Talawa Dam into the Goulburn Mulwaree Council area. So we decided to go down to there to see, basically to see what we could observe.
So is it fair to say you were using the dam as a place that would give you a good vantage point, rather than any suggestion that the fire first crossed from one LGA into another at the dam?
Yeah, that's correct. It's more of an advantage point to see what we could actually observe from that location.
All right. You say in your report, in the second last paragraph from the bottom, it was evident from our location at the dam that there had been varying runs of fire in different directions over a number of days. How was that evident to you?
From the indicators that we observed and the amount of fire damage to the vegetation.
The indicators that you observed at the dam, I withdraw that. From your vantage point at the dam, were you able to observe micro indicators?
Only micro, no micro indicators at all macro.
And was that just because of the distance between your vantage point at the dam and the country you were looking at?
That's correct.
And how is it that the macro indicators were able to demonstrate that there'd been varying runs in different directions over a number of days?
Just from the how they leave the indicator on the vegetation type. So the runs and the fire activity in and around that dam area, because of the terrain, would also cause the fires to move in different directions.
Indeed, is it the case that the fire on occasion jumped back and forth across the Shoalhaven River?
It appears that it may have done that, yes.
All right, so we can't be definitive, but that's one hypothesis.
That's correct, yes.
In addition to the observations you made at the dam, were you able to review line scans available to the Rural Fire Service?
That is correct, yes.
And did you review those line scans before or after your attendance at the dam?
We did have them prior to going to the dam, but they were just the raw line scan. It wasn't overlaid onto a map at that point.
All right. Have they since been overlaid onto a map?
They have.
Okay. I might take you to those in a minute, but is it the case that your conclusion is the Moreton fire was in fact a continuation of the Currawong fire once it entered the Goulburn Mulwary LGA and later the Wingecarribee LGA?
That's correct.
And is it your theory that the Currawong fire firstly spread to the west of Talawa Dam?
That's correct.
And later to the north of the Kangaroo River?
That's correct.
It's important, isn't it, when considering the cause and origin of a fire that might be due to spread across a local government area boundary, to also consider whether there are independent ignition sources for the fire?
Yes.
And was there any evidence obtained in your investigation to otherwise suggest an independent ignition source for the Moreton fire?
No, there wasn't.
I'm going to have a line scan brought up on the screen for you, Mr. Fullagarra. Could you just tell me whether or not it's too blurry to be of much use to you? But it's the line scan from page 1782 of the brief. If you have a copy there in hard copy, sir, please turn that up.
Yeah, I've got that here.
All right. Now, could you explain to Her Honour what this line scan displays?
Yeah, the line scan shows by the yellow and the dark red components of it, the active edge of the fires at that time. I think that one was taken at 1552, according to our records.
All right, so 1552.
That's correct.
Is that on the 4th of January?
That is on the 4th of January.
All right. So firstly, the line scan seems to be comprised of a map that sits underneath some sort of satellite footage. Is that a fair description?
That is a fair description, yes.
Because you've told Her Honour earlier today that you initially had the line scans, but they hadn't yet been inserted across RFS maps. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Now, the red lines on this map demonstrate the local government boundaries. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
So to the bottom right-hand side, we have the Shoalhaven City Council.
Yes.
To the north or to the top of the screen, we have the Wingecarribee local government area.
correct.
And to the west or to the left, we have the Goulburn Mulwary local government area. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, you've told Her Honour that the bright yellow markings that we can see on the line scan represent, is it active fire front?
That is an active fire front, yes.
Okay. And then, although it might not be particularly clear on the screen, there seems to be a small dot that's red in colour to the right-hand side of the line scan. Is that also active fire?
That is correct. The red is more intense fire activity.
Okay. So if we are to interpret this line scan, does it suggest that at 15:52 on the 4th of January 2020, the fire had crossed into the Goulburn Mulwary local government area, but not yet the Wingecarribee local government area?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm now going to ask you to have regard to a line scan that's set out in the brief at page 1783, and that will shortly come up on screen. Mr. Fulliger, can you tell the court what time this line scan was taken?
That was at 16:31 on the 4th of January.
So within about 40 minutes of the previous line scan?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And could you explain what the purple shading is that we can see on this scan?
Smoke or cloud.
And that is...
the line scan couldn't go through it.
Okay. And is it the case that the line scan won't differentiate between whether it is smoke or cloud?
That's correct.
In any event, it seems that the smoke or cloud has developed just in the course of the previous 40 minutes when we compare this line scan to the one from 15:52. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And although the fire has continued to burn in the Goulburn Mulwary local government area, is it a fair interpretation to say that the fire has also really developed in that sort of eastern corner of the Shoalhaven local government area?
Yeah, very much so, yes.
Can one draw that conclusion when you compare even the colour of the active fire shown on one line scan to the next, or is that sort of an analysis too crude?
No, it has been increasing in intensity in this line scan.
Now, just in terms of your the caption that you include underneath the line scan in your report, can you just explain to the court what later happens with this fire as it's burning within the Goulburn Mulwary local government area?
Just one moment. I've got to go back to my notes for that. I can't because the bottom's cut off my description there.
I see.
Just one moment. Yeah, so basically describing that the fire is still burning within the Goulburn Mulwary LGA and
Yes.
severe run down towards the in an easterly direction. And
That's the fire activity we can see in the Shoalhaven, is that right?
Yep, that's correct, yes. And it's these fronts that under the southerly would then turn into a fire travelling in a northerly direction.
All right. Well, the fire that's broached the Goulburn Mulwary local government area in this line scan ends up making a run under that southerly, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And it eventually threatens and, in fact, impacts upon Wingello.
That is correct.
And is it fair to say that the fire within the Shoalhaven LGA also later takes a run under the southerly and heads towards the Kangaroo River.
Correct.
And did that fire ultimately affect the township of Bundanoon?
Correct.
Okay. Next, I'm going to ask you to have regard to the line scan that's set out at page 1784 of the brief, which will come up on the screen. Mr. Fulliger, can you tell the court what time this line scan was taken?
This was taken at 4 minutes past midnight on the 5th of January, 2020.
Right. And although it's not particularly clear on the version displayed in court, does this line scan demonstrate that at least one run to the left-hand side of the fire has moved from the Shoalhaven through Goulburn Mulwarry and then entered the Wingecarribee LGA?
That is correct, yes.
And is it a fair interpretation to say that another arm, if you like, of the fire has taken a separate run to the northeast of the first arm, and it has crossed from the Shoalhaven LGA directly into the Wingecarribee?
Correct.
So does this line scan in effect depict those runs of the Moreton fire that separately impacted upon Wingello and Bundanoon?
Yes, it does.
Although it's obscured on the screen, I'm going to read to you from the caption that you've included underneath that line scan. And you say that there was approximately 7 hours between line scan 3 and line scan 4.
Yes.
Does that time frame permit you to draw a conclusion about the speed in which the fire was travelling across those 7 hours?
Not really my area of expertise, but yes, that is,
Right,
it's travelled.
If it's not your area of
distance in a short
expertise, we
time.
don't need you to comment further.
Thank you, mate.
Now, is it the case, Mr. Fulliger, that because the Moreton fire was caused by the spread of the Currowan fire, any cause and origin finding in relation to the Moreton fire has to refer back to the original ignition of the Currowan fire?
That is correct.
Your Honour, those are my questions for this witness.
Mr. Newton, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Your Honour.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fulliger. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour. Thank you, Your Honour.
Your Honour, tomorrow we will hear from witnesses relating to the Clyde Mountain and the Charlies Forest fire. And we'll also conclude by hearing some family statements from the families of Mr. Butler, Mr. Andrew and Mr. Campbell, should they wish to share anything with the court and with those people watching at home.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. We'll adjourn and resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.